Alright guys, so this next video that I've just made is going to be focusing on the Marines in Aliens Fireteam. Now, just to preface this, this is mostly for feedback for the devs, these videos. It's not for any other purpose really, so all these suggestions and this and that, don't tell me about it. You know, go to the Discord and, you know, start plugging away at the gameplay feedback chat. So anyway, I've got several topics to cover. So I've got the roles of the Marines. I've got the motion tracker that has its own little section. I've got the HUD, that's not so much a thing. The movement, the weapons, and just a few little suggestions for afterwards, which are kind of not related to anything else. So this is mostly just to give feedback on what exists in the game and what can be fixed. It's not it's like, this is just kind of the best way of doing it. Make it right before you go ahead and make new content. Otherwise you end up with games like Ark Survival of old, where they just refuse to fix their broken as fuck game and then just keep churning out new content and leaving that, you know, and then you just have a game full of broken things that don't work ever. So, first topic, the roles. So, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, so we've got 5 roles. So we've got the gunner, the demolisher, the technician, the doc, and the recon. The doc and the recon we haven't seen, but nonetheless this still applies. So, from what I can tell, so in the gameplay it was technician, gunner, and demolisher. And it seems that the classes, while they're supposed to have sort of a role to play, if you know what I mean, it's meant to be on teamwork, especially, you know, that should seem especially important given that there's only 3 players. And while it was only on a low difficulty setting, it seems as if there's low levels of dependency on the classes on one another. Now, in certain team-based games that I've played, one in particular called Evolve, that is probably the most heavily team-based game, and I think it's something that Aliens Fireteam should aspire towards, to be honest. However, my objective here is to suggest the easiest option to go for, one that will be, you know, effective and quick to implement. So I would not be the first to suggest reworking the class system. So I would present 2 options here. One is reworking the class system. The other is making the class system work for the maps. So here's what I mean by that. I mean, you do not want a team full of classes that can just handle any map, any environment, any set of xenomorphs, no matter what. You do not want one solution beats all. That is very bad. So what you want is to have to, you know, change it up and change your teamwork and change your strategy based on, you know, based on the different environments and different challenges you're presented with. Okay? And this will inspire teamwork. And not only that, but it also that there has to be a certain level of dependency on each class. Each class should have a role to play. So perhaps I can better explain this with using Evolve as an example. So Evolve, you have, if for those of you who haven't played it, Evolve, you have 1 monster, 4 hunters, and there is a single class for each hunter, and each class is mandatory. So you can only have 1 assault, you can only have 1 medic, you can only have 1 support, and you can only have 1 trapper, and you can't have 2 assaults and then sacrifice, say, the medic for the extra assault and then just go with trapper and support. You can't do that. But each class has its own variants. There are 5 different medics, there are 5 different assaults, there are 5 different you know, trappers, etc. And they all have their own abilities and different strengths. And they are designed in sets. So there is 1 set that is designed for taking down a specific monster. And while you can mix and match different hunters from different sets, each set is designed to work synergistically. So, for example, let's see, 1 set is probably my favourite. So this has a medic called Lazarus, who can he's not very good at healing, but he can revive dead players and he can revive incapacitated players without giving them a health penalty. So the health penalty is that their maximum health is reduced each time they get incapacitated and revived. But with Lazarus, you don't get that. And he revives much faster as well. However, he's not very good at healing, so people go down and get incapacitated and killed by the monster a lot quicker. But it's all for nothing if the monster, because they come back, they can be revived. It's all for nothing if the monster kills the player and then they just get revived again. So what the monster has to do is camp the body and make sure that it doesn't get revived until the timer runs dry, or just eat the body if he can, but mostly he has to camp it. So the way this works in terms of the whole synergistic effect is that because the monster is often forced to camp the body, the team can do much more damage to it. And with this particular monster, camping bodies is not favourable. It's quite squishy, and on top of that, the assault has a poison gas grenade for one of his abilities, which is better than, say, using mines. So it's like the ideal thing for doing damage while the monster is camping a body. He's got a flamethrower, and then on top of that, there's a support character which has sentry guns that he can deploy, which also again just adds to the body camping damage, and so on. So it's all set up around that. So this is what I'm talking about. So how this could translate into Aliens Fireteam, I think, is quite simple. I think, you should have one medic, one recon, and one damage specialist. That is how I think it should work. And it's been suggested by many that the recon should be the only class that has the motion tracker. Now, I don't want to judge prematurely, but it's also been suggested that the recon has a map or of some kind. Maybe it's a fill-in map, maybe it's a pre-rendered map of the area, so that, or maybe the recon just has the waypoints available while the others do not. Who knows? These are just ideas. So, and then the medic, we don't quite know the role of the medic beyond healing, and we don't know the abilities. However, it seemed to me that the medic was kind of redundant with the team in the 25-minute gameplay that we saw, since, well, people were just able to heal themselves anyway, and they were able to do enough damage to, not really need top-ups. Or rather avoid enough damage to not need top-ups, and even when they did get attacked, they didn't take a whole lot, with maybe a couple of exceptions. So the idea is that if your medic goes down and dies, you're in pretty bad shape. If your recon goes down and dies, you're in pretty bad shape. You without your medic, you're not gonna be able to heal yourselves, and you might not last for the rest of the game. Without the recon, you might not be able to find that shortcut that you were looking for that gets you past the majority of the nasty aliens, or basically you're not going to have the information to know which path is the best to take, perhaps where to get resupplies, etc. And with the damage specialist, that could be the gunner or the demolisher or even the technician, arguably, then you're not going to have enough firepower to deal with all the aliens. So I think that interplay, that the dependency is very, very important. You all got to keep each other alive, no man left behind, because you all need each other that badly. That's the idea. So having this system that for classes that Evolve has, I think would be ideal. However, I realise reworking it could be tough and could be time consuming, and there may not be time for that. So I think perhaps a quicker and easier to implement idea would be simply to base the maps around specific types of gameplay. So it sucks to have sort of one thing beats all. So I think the technician, the demolisher, and the gunner kind of all qualify as damage classes from what we've seen. The technician's damage is just dealt in different ways to, say, the gunner or the demolisher. The demolisher's, sort of should be slow but heavy firepower and less maneuverability. However, he seems as maneuverable as everybody else, but nonetheless. And the gunner, I think, just sounds like the sort of more all-rounder. He's got a different weapon for everything, right? For long range, mid range, and short range. And then the technician has his sentries and his shotgun. So I think, say, if I can think of an example here, I think the technician would not be very good in close quarters, and neither, well, perhaps maybe with a shotgun, but I think the demolisher with the smart gun would not be very good in close quarters either. He needs a bit of range and some line of sight for his smart gun to work, so and kill the aliens before they're able to get close. The technician's sentry would be quite ideal for wide open spaces, I think, or places where you can get flanked. And the gunner, again, being an all-rounder, not terribly strong in any one area, so the gunner would be best for maps with a large variety of different environments so that you can kind of deal with all of them. But then again, if you just go for 3 damage specialists that kind of can deal with all those, then again, the other 2 classes might just seem a little bit redundant. So, the idea is, instead of changing the class system, you just change the map layout so that you have to choose your classes a little more tactically. You have to pick your class, your damage class or whatever, based on the map and based on, how well it's going to work, instead of just, picking the golden trio. So, some smaller points, okay? So, for one thing, I think, again, this is taken from Evolve. I think that the weapons that each class carries, particularly, say, the non-damage specialists like the Recon and the Medic, should be suited only to their roles, or rather, they should not overstep their roles. So, for example, I think the Medic should have a shotgun or an SMG, just a weapon that's effective at close range, but not effective at any other, at other things, because the Medic is not someone that you want out there fighting, running and gunning, and then getting killed, because if the Medic goes down, you're screwed, right? But he needs to be able to protect himself. So having a weapon that's short range, so he can stay close to his buddies and heal them, and do his job as the medic, as well as protecting himself and them when the aliens get too close. A shotgun seems like a really good weapon for him. As for the Recon, that's a little more difficult to pin down. I think most people would probably say a sniper or something like a DMR. Okay, so I have some important points to make about the motion tracker. Now, I mentioned it earlier, but just to reiterate this, many of us in the community think that the motion tracker should be restricted to the Recon class. There's some sort of hit and miss with whether it should be handheld or not. There's different suggestions. Some people have said handheld, some people said it's fine as it is. Some people have said you should have to bring it up like a mini-map or something like that, or when the Recon brings it up, everyone can see it. But I think having the Recon only be able to see it would be perhaps the best, since this isn't generally a game you want to play with random people. You want to play it with your buddies. So this would be best for sort of this would force communication, really. But that being said, all that is all for nothing. That would be all for nothing at the moment, because the motion tracker as it is useless anyway. It doesn't matter if the Recon has it, and it's useless because of the aliens. Now, I made my point about the aliens AI in a previous video, but so yeah, the aliens are just very non-threatening, and there's far too many. It's just more rewarding to actually look in front of you and see them coming, rather than use the motion tracker to find out where they are, because they're usually always in the same place in front of you, and they don't often flank, but occasionally they do. nonetheless, even when they do flank around, they seem to do very little damage or anything else. I understand it was an easier difficulty, but even so. So, that is important. Make the motion tracker actually have a use, and then make it so that use is restricted to the recon, because at the moment there's just no point in using it. It's good to have a use for the motion tracker, but it also needs to have some downsides. So not being able to use your weapons, for example, while using it, that would be one thing. Next point. So I think certain mutators could be applied to the motion tracker. I'm sure you've probably thought of this, but just things that affect the quality of information. So perhaps, false readings, low resolution blips. So like say when a few aliens get fairly close together, it just kind of forms one large blip, and you're not sure how many there are exactly or what direction they're moving in. Another one would be a lower pulse rate. So instead of going beep 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 beep, it updates less frequently. So I don't know, 1 second the aliens could be 10 meters from you, and then the next blip, which is perhaps, I don't know, even a few seconds later, they're right on you. So that could be one thing. And finally, this is a small thing. I think it would help raise suspense were the motion tracker, again, actually useful. One thing that would help would be sort of a bit of a buffering effect when it comes to ramping up and ramping down the pitch of the motion tracker. So, the pitch ramps up when the sort of enemy gets closer and closer and closer. And obviously ramps down when they get further away. However, I think there should be a bit of a delay effect to this. So it would kind of give the motion tracker a personality, I think, because it's kind of, let's say the alien just comes really, really close to me. It's like 3 meters from me, and it stays there for a while, for whatever reason, just for the sake of argument. And then it moves away. I think it would be best if the pitch stayed higher even after it's moved away, and then slowly came down. It would mirror sort of, or parallel sort of, a person's heartbeat in a way, calming down. It doesn't go down straight away as soon as the enemy's gone. So, yeah, I would suggest making it a bit more like that. And of course, if there's even more enemies on the tracker, then the pitch should ramp up even quicker than say if there's just one, no matter how close they are. Exactly. Just lots of enemies means high pitch, even so it should be based on the threat level ultimately. And as for sort of ramping down of the pitch when the enemies go away, again, it should be slow, so that even if they come back in close range, it's still high pitch. Like even if they come back to close range within a short time period, it's still high pitch, and it takes a while to settle down. So Alien Isolation did this, but they didn't do this with the motion tracker. They did it with the music. So they had a whole algorithm set up around sort of the intensity of the music based on the threat level posed by the alien. It was very cleverly done. I've only got a few more points to make left, so just little ones from this point. So one is the movement, I think. So the alien attacks are it just seems too easy to dodge them. Players seem to only have to strafe to move out the way of most of them, and really I think that's just too easy. All you got to do is backpedal and strafe around to dodge the attacks. Screw that. I would say it should be a requirement to roll no matter what, pretty much, unless they're really far away and it was just kind of a bad shot, so to speak, on the alien's part. I think in most situations you should have to be able to roll. So either slow the strafing speed, or just make the aliens a bit more accurate when it comes to their attacks. Either one, but I mean, if the cure is worse than the disease in that case, then I'd suggest, improving the alien AI a bit. That's always a good shout, I would say. So the next thing is the smart gun. It kind of does bleed into movement here. So from what we've seen so far, this is a very powerful weapon. It has, high damage per shot, a high rate of fire. It automatically targets incoming enemies and highlights them as they come in within a certain range, as any smart gun should, I suppose. However, the drawbacks of the smart gun in the films and just what should be expected in real life aren't there. So you can run with the smart gun, you can roll with the smart gun, and the reload time is not very long at all. It's fairly quick, so like there's no problems with it, and there need to be, in order to just not make it a brain dead weapon. You know, it needs to have some character to it. So things that have been suggested include, you know, increasing the reload time significantly, so it's a little bit more clunky. Someone suggested even just outright having to ditch the weapon once it runs out of ammo, so which is not a bad idea if you start off with a reasonable ammo capacity to begin with and you have to ration it. So that's not bad. One of my suggestions is to reduce the range at which the enemies are highlighted, so maybe 10 meters, so you can't just see them from a mile away. It's only when they get sort of fairly close, but not too close, that you can actually highlight them. And one last thing is, instead of adapting the smart gun around the game, adapt the game around the smart gun. So things like having more environments where the smart gun is not a very optimal weapon. So places with close quarters and only short line of sight would be such situations, I think. You know, you need to be able to see them coming and have a fair distance in order to get them, because otherwise the auto aiming is just going to screw you over. Okay, so this one is a little bit off topic. So this is actually a section for a couple of suggestions that I have for this. Now, these are the last things you should consider. Always consider fixing what's in the game already before implementing new things. So if there's time, or if it's worth doing, do it. So you know, I'm a big fan of Aliens, and I've had a lot of time to sort of think about why that film was so good and what is it that just created this overwhelming and ever imminent sense of dread and doom. And I think I've nailed it down to the fact that everything for the Marines just goes horribly wrong from start to finish, pretty much. And on top of that, it kind of adds to the contrast even more, because these aliens are just so Marines are just so gung-ho, so cocky and so confident, you know, thinking they're the ultimate badasses. And their problems begin when they go into the atmosphere processor. They find out the colonists are there, and to not take too long to go through this, but here's what happens. Okay, first they're told that they can't fire their weapons in there.
So, if they fire their weapons in there, won't they rupture the cooling system?
Second, they find that they're surrounded by the aliens as they're moving in.
Multiple signals! They're closing!
The aliens don't show up on their infrared.
Man, they're all around us, man. Jesus.
Maybe they don't show up on infrared at all.
They lose their sergeant.
God, where's the phone? Where's the phone? Sergeant, stop! Get the fuck out of here!
Then they lose Drake, one of the smart gunners. Then, once they finally manage to get out of there after almost their entire squad is dead, they then call in the dropship, which then crashes and destroys the APC along with all the supplies that they had left, pretty much, except for a couple of robot sentries and some pulse rifles.
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do?
And then it doesn't stop there, because then they have to fall back into Hadley's Hope, only to find that they've now got a death clock of 4 hours because the atmosphere processor is about to blow from the crash that I mentioned earlier. So, and the only way to call the dropship down is through the aliens, because their transmitter is busted and they have to use the one at the colony.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
And there is even more after that. There's just so many things that don't go the way things are meant to. So, in inspiration of that, I would suggest trying a similar thing. So one idea is to do this, It's to, with the mutators or the challenge cards, instead of having a single mutator, you have a series of mutators. So one thing goes wrong, then another and another in sequence throughout the mission. I think this would help create that kind of sense of dread and just, you know, game over, man. So that's one idea. And the other idea, of course, is one of the things I mentioned earlier is the first thing that went wrong for the Marines. It's they can't use their weapons in the area. Now, I'm not suggesting doing it anything like, you know, just disabling all their weapons or not giving them any weapons. However, I think it should be done like this. Certain objects should be placed which can be activated by stray bullets if hit. That would cause, you know, things to go wrong for the Marines. So I've noticed, you know, there's some explosive crates in the 25-minute gameplay demo, or tanks, whatever, but they're bright red. They're quite obvious, and you're like, oh, look, I can just blow the aliens up like that. What if you didn't know what they were? What if they were unmarked and you couldn't really see them that well? You accidentally shot one when your teammate was standing near it. Oops. That wasn't meant to happen, was it? So things like that, it's kind of a risk-reward kind of thing. So the other things could be, you know, leakage of smoke to obscure line of sight, giving the aliens the advantage, or steam in order to, you know, like steam vents in order to sort of block passage, or poisonous gas to create areas of denial, or even a sort of pressure wave behind you, forcing you to evacuate the area and continue on instead of and change position. You could be in an advantageous position until the poisonous gas comes in and forces you into a tight space or something. Another one would be blackouts or emergency lights. You could accidentally hit some sort of power relay and oof, there it goes. Now you're in the dark. And a final one would be door closures as well. Perhaps, you know, bullets hit the door controls or something and you're locked out. Who knows? These are just some ideas. So with that, I think that's the end of this video. So yeah, thank you for listening, and let me know what you think.